The Porsche Cayenne. When it was first launched, there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth from the purists who said the company had sold out by making a big SUV and that it could never be a real Porsche. But love it or hate it, you can't argue with its success. Since its launch in 2002, they've sold 280,000 of them. Now let me break that down for you. That means that every day, all over the world, for the past 8 years, they've sold 95 Cayennes. Clearly, the Cayenne recipe is working for Porsche then. With that success in the bag and the money in the bank, they hosted the world launch of the new Cayenne at their factory and demonstration track in Leipzig, Germany, and RPM was there to get the South African television exclusive. But we arrived early and found we had a bit of time on our hands, so we headed over to the Leipzig Expo Center. Quite coincidentally, Porsche decided to hold the launch of their new Cayenne right slap bang in the middle of the Leipzig Motor Show. So, with a Sunday afternoon to kill, we decided to come take in the sights. And there were quite a few sights to take in, and very many people there to take them in with us. The Leipzig Motor Show isn't one of the biggest in the world, but it's large enough to fill a few halls of the exhibition center. As you'd expect, most of the stuff on display was German, and our first stop was at Audi. They had quite a few new models to show off, including the A8, the A1, and the very menacing RS5. Hyundai were there with an SUV and some World Cup fever, and the Renault stand was also fairly well populated. We tried our best to get to the Megane RS, but it was covered in lusting Leipzigians, so we went elsewhere. Of course, we couldn't leave without coming to see what Porsche has on their stand, and as you'd expect, they've got the new Cayenne, they've also got the Panamera, but there is one car here that I cannot wait to get my hands on. The Boxster Spider, with curves in all the right places and a 240 kilowatt flat 6 in the middle. This car is designed for pure open-top driving thrills. It was an afternoon well spent in the old East German town, but we soon had to head back to our hotel to prepare for the main event. I'm probably not the only person in the world who would list the Cayenne as his least favorite Porsche. The styling of the original was disturbing, and I think the engineers themselves realized that they had done something a little amiss. So much so that the designer last night at a very fancy dinner admitted that when they designed this version, they started with a completely blank sheet of paper. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the best approach they could have taken. The old Cayenne looked like it had a Porsche face grafted onto a lorry, and the rear wasn't much better. With this new version, the most noticeable thing they've done is soften the old version's square looks. The front now has real Porsche genes, the most obvious bit being what the designer calls the shark nose. If you look at the line of the bonnet and the headlights, it's very similar to a 911, but amazingly, despite its size, it actually works. The improvements to the rear are even more impressive than those at the front, and the car now looks a whole lot more together. For me, the old Cayenne was a total turn-off, but the new one is a real head-turner. They haven't exactly gone back to a blank sheet of paper on the interior though. There's still a typical Porsche 5-dial setup in the sports steering wheel and the rising center console first seen in the Carrera GT and also now found in the Panamera. At first glance, the whole setup seems a little bit confusing and overwhelming, but it soon becomes logical and easy to operate, and it is finished off superbly. Leather, Alcantara, real metal, great plastics, and a build quality as solid as the rest of their engineering. The Cayenne cockpit closes around you in a comfortable and involving way. The technology is all top class and completely user-friendly, and everything feels good. It's the kind of place you'd be happy in no matter what kind of traffic or driving conditions the outside world was throwing at you. Porsche are very proud of the fact that their cars are the kinds of things you can use every day, but still get real performance thrills from. I know that's true of the 911, but the Cayenne? To be honest, I was really skeptical about the new Cayenne even before I drove it. A few years ago, all the environmentalists and the politicians got together and decided that the motor industry was to blame for all the world's pollution problems. And they wrote a few laws and passed off a few restrictions, and all of that meant that companies like Porsche had to build cars that were more efficient. And I was worried that that shift in focus would take away from some of the Porsche magic. I was worried, but I shouldn't have been. Because when Porsche do something, they do it right. We had dinner with a few senior employees of the company, and despite the fact they're German, they didn't hold back showing their absolute passion for building the best sports cars in the world. I got the impression they would build anything with the same passion, as long as it was the best of its kind. In fact, they did. Now, those of you that read my blog on the RPM website might be familiar with my disdain for bicycles and cyclists, but somehow a green bike made by Porsche with an RS badge on it is a little bit more acceptable. They haven't quite got rid of the need for ridiculous headgear yet, but they've certainly made cycling a lot better. I don't know what this bike is called, and they refuse to say how much it cost to make, but it does make a lot of sense. It uses a kinetic energy recovery system to help you pedal. In other words, the energy produced under braking is stored in a little power unit, and then, depending on the setting on the control unit, which just happens to double up as an iPhone, it uses that energy to help drive the rear wheel when you pedal. I'm not sure what came first, the ridiculously expensive self-pedaling bike or the Cayenne hybrid, but they have some things in common. In deference to us driving the hybrid, I've put on my floral shirt. I had a fully organic breakfast this morning, and I walked from the hotel to the factory to collect the car. Promise. The Porsche Cayenne hybrid uses one supercharged V6 and one electric motor, and depending on the behavior of your right foot or traffic conditions, it can use them independently or together. It's all managed by some very clever mechanical bits and some very clever electronics, and while that might sound like a product of the modern age, the first hybrid was in fact invented over 100 years ago by Mr. Porsche himself. It was called the Lorna Porsche Sempervivus. It weighed 1,200 kilograms and had a combined output of just over 6 kilowatts. Things have advanced somewhat since the car was developed in 1900, thankfully. The new Porsche hybrid is almost double the weight of the original, but it puts out almost 50 times the amount of power, 279 kilowatts to be exact. The system uses a separator clutch which can disengage the engine completely and allow the car to cruise through traffic on electric power only. If more power is needed, the engine starts up in 0.3 of a second and you're on your way. If you really want to get going, it'll use the full output of both the petrol and electric motors. Driving the Cayenne hybrid takes some getting used to. The sounds of silence aren't what you expect from a supercharged V6. So I was kind of glad we spent most of our time with another Cayenne.